Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Ferghal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to MedHeads, the show where we discuss topical issues from a biopsychosocial perspective. And today we have two great guests with us. Firstly, we've got Maree Eisma, who's a mental health approved social worker, and we have Ian Bunston, who is a community connection officer in Box Hill. So I'm just going to say hello to Maree first. Maree, do you want to say hello and describe your job role for the benefit of the audience?
Hello, thank you. So I'm a clinical mental health social worker working in the sector for about 20 years. With a big background sort of in drug and alcohol, and certainly family therapy trained, and seeing the impact of some of the more recent events and realising that there's a big need for some supports out there at the moment.
There is. And Ian, welcome Ian. Tell us a little bit about your role.
Fergal, my position is what's called a community connector at Box Hill Central Shopping Centre. It goes beyond the shopping centre to the city of Whitehorse. But probably in a nutshell, my role has by and large been creating, initiating, developing purposeful social pursuits that I can engage people with. We're living in times more than ever before where people are disengaged, and particularly with the latest things that have been happening with the drought and the bushfires and now this coronavirus, we need it more than ever before. So I've been very excited about this position. I've just been in it a little under a year now, and but there's a lot that has eventuated in that time.
So Ian, I had the pleasure of listening to you talk about, I don't know, was it 6 months ago?
In October.
Yeah. And I was really impressed by your presentation that you did on the importance and value of social connectedness. Can you tell us give us a few words on that? What's your idea of the value and importance of social connectedness?
Well, there's probably a number of things, Fergal, and in fact, you've helped me to enlighten my understanding of this as well, might I add. But then there's a number of issues that we're facing, as I already mentioned. And Hugh McKay, who's a sociologist who's studied the social landscape for the last 50 years in this country, he launched a book at the beginning of 2018 called Australia Reimagined. And it pointed out a number of things about people in terms of our society, where we're facing challenges. But if you drilled it down to some of the really important and pertinent things, it's our disengagement and also mental health issues. So that's been a driving force for me with regard to what's behind a lot of the activities, programs that I've been trying to develop. And then in my relationship with you and getting to know Carrington Health, yourself and Turning Point, and I'm becoming aware of your treatment and what you do with patients with regard to substance abuse and also mental health issues. There was just an amazing synergies between what you're doing and what I was doing. So in terms of moving towards a partnership, of perhaps being a part of the whole process of supporting these people going through this, I could at my end provide social meaningful pursuits that they could engage with. It would help towards or contribute towards their recovery, and it's something that you pointed out very strongly to me, which has really encouraged me to pursue more of these pursuits for both.
Yeah. So, but you've just mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to drill down on. So, you weren't always a community connectedness officer at Box Hill, were you? What was your role previously?
Well, I'm in semi-retirement now. I was a principal and an active principal of school for many, many years in it. So my background's in education. So it's been very much leading a school community. So having finished in that chapter of my life, I now find myself not leading a shopping centre community, but being integrally involved in that community by helping provide, as I've said, pursuits that can connect people. And there's a whole range of those things that we've been doing, which I'm happy to unpack as we go along.
Yeah, well, we will. But you've identified social disconnectedness as a huge driver for social misery, basically, haven't you?
Correct. And I think even it was Swinburne Institute of Technology released a really important study just the other year, which was really outlining very, very much in line with what Hugh McKay was saying about this issue of loneliness, where more, I mean, that is one of the major configurations of households in this day and age, the growing single person households. You know, it's, I mean, there are reports out as well, as you would know, that it's a huge factor contributing towards earlier death. Loneliness is a key thing. And so therefore, we need to do our best to address that by reconnecting people in ways that they feel comfortable, the ways that they can feel honest and trustworthy relationships and connections. And I really believe that's paramount for our society today.
So I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, loneliness has been identified as a there's no other way of saying it. It's a killer. It's as lethal as heart disease in certain situations. So Maree, I mean, what we've spoken about, does that resonate with you in any way, Maree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There was something that I stumbled across, some research that said, you can be drinking your 2 litres of water and, you know, keeping your low sugar diets and doing your, 60 minutes of physical activity or, 10,000 steps per day. But if you are not socially connected, then so much of that just goes by the wayside.
Yeah. So how do you see in your clinical practice, Maree, a loss of social connectedness? How does that impact upon the people that you see? And what effect does it have?
Major depression, major anxiety. I was only having supervision the other day about this, where that for us to have a sense of self, we only have a sense of self that's derived by connections with other people. Otherwise, we have no sense of who we are.
That's an interesting point. Say that again.
If we make sense of who we are based on our connections and interconnectedness with other people.
So there's no such thing as an existential personal identity. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just know that clients don't, and we have a sense of who we are based on our, our socialization, the way we grow up in our families. It's through our modeling, through our interconnection with people that we know what's appropriate conduct and what's not appropriate conduct. We can't learn these skills in isolation, but in response to sort of your question, mental health, if people are not having a sense of social connectedness, they are at major risk for, I've personally seen, seeking refuge in substances myself. I've certainly seen people ending up in major depressive episodes. And for some people, if you are not getting enough social stimulation, I've seen people literally become quite psychotic. I mean, a classic example, and you would know this, and anyone else who does mental health, the criteria that people now use to actually put people in seclusion has to be incredibly,
threshold's very high, isn't it?
You cannot just dump people in seclusion. Because we know that just makes people's mental health 100 times worse.
And we also know that seclusion and exclusion from society actually can trigger psychosis, in very extreme cases.
Absolutely.
What was that movie with Tom Hanks? Tom Hanks did a movie where he was Castaway. Remember the movie Castaway? He became psychotic, didn't he, because he was so alone.
Yeah, he created that basketball.
He created that persona.
Or the netball, or a soccer ball that he actually ended up having. It created another being, for a better set of words. Yeah.
I often thought that was a very good demonstration or exposition of isolation causing psychosis.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So going back to Ian, you're involved in a lot of community projects that are aimed at improving the social connectedness of the people around you and in your workplace. Why were you employed in that role, do you think?
It's interesting.
What's in it for Box Hill?
Yes. Well, you see, it's a joint, just to give you the context, it's a joint partnership between a not-for-profit Chorus Connect organisation that employ me with Box Hill Central, which is owned by the company Vicinity. Okay, so it's been a partnership. with regard to Chorus, their view is that, or their vision is that they want to see more vibrant and connected communities where individuals, families, organisations flourish better. Okay, giving them a really strong sense of hope in the future. There's a lot of trust, as we know, that's been lost in our society over recent times. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't need to, talk about all of those royal commissions that we've had. With Vicinity, it was interesting when I came on board. The main drivers that we set up were things such as helping to reduce the level of crime within the centre, which was interesting.
That's an interesting point. Yes.
Which was also.
So let me just stop you there. I find that fascinating. So they felt that social connectedness in the community would reduce crime. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because people often they viewed that people who were getting involved in those types of activities, it was basically driven by the fact that they didn't have purposeful pursuits in their life, which then in turn builds self-esteem, viability in what I'm contributing towards society. So I think that they did see that. Another one of the drivers too, Fergal, was about increasing the perception of safety within the centre. So there was. I was really having to mesh the vision of Chorus Connect with Vicinity. And that led me to working with a whole range of different groups. Perhaps I can give one example. Vic Pole have been absolutely magnificent, the Victorian Police Force. And may I even just hold up one of our little posters here? I can show you this here. This is what we do. This is, if you can see that, this won't be for all, and maybe not for some of your patients.
Coffee with a cop.
Coffee with a cop. We run this once a month. It's in recess just at the moment, but we hold that in the Centre Mall, right in a very public space. And anyone, it's advertised locally. It's also advertised through Neighbourhood Watch and also through the Victorian Police Force. They send a number of their police officers in, as with their PSOs, and we sit down in the food court, and we're tables and chairs, very conducive for people to sit, have a pre-coffee, and then connect. Now it's about building respectful relationships, and also understanding our legal enforcement officers in this place are not to be feared. They're good people who want to support us, even though at times we hear to the averse of that. But by and large, they're there to support us. But just to give you some examples, some of the conversations that I used to hear would be about, say, pending court cases and the understanding of, how I should react. My son's had a driving offence. What should I do there? There was some grandparents that had brought their grandchildren in for the morning, and they were sitting down having their little tiny mochachinos or whatever you call them, and they're talking about, should I be wearing bike helmets, or where do I ride my bicycle? So, there's all these types of, conversations that were going on, but by and large, building respectful relationships. So that's been really, really a patronised event each month. It's been great. Yeah.
So Maree, what do you think about Coffee with a Cop? And moreover, what do you think about purposeful activity, social connectedness, reducing crime? What's your take on that, Maree? Why would that be what's the mechanism behind that, do you reckon?
I can absolutely appreciate that if people have a sense of purpose and a people of commitment or a desire to work to something that's seen as meaningful, conducive. I think, look, I don't want to generalise, but and you'd know this with clients in rehab and, people, when people have a sense of connecting with their inherent gift or something that actually inspires and enlivens, that can be such a catalyst for change. So when people are actually purposeful...
Let me stop you there. Maree, can I just stop you there? What's an inherent gift?
Well, when I work with clients, like for me, I like to sit there and think about things that light them up. Like if, I might say to a client, because some people will come and say, look, I don't know where I want to go. I don't know what I want to do. Sometimes people will have been doing a role or an occupation that they took on to, because parents wanted them to, or because they felt that if they didn't do this, then, but sometimes people really, part of their suffering has actually been because they've been pursuing something that never lit them up in the first place. So, you know, without going down the whole road around, you know, terms such as individuation and stuff like that, which is...
Well, why don't we?
Well, we can, but I mean, essentially...
Let's do that.
Okay, so one of the things I'll often ask clients is to say to them, you know, what is something that you could talk to about for hours on end that you know so much about, you know, and if they still look at me blankly, I'll say, you know, what books have you got on your bedside table you are currently reading now? Or what, you know, if someone was to scan your bookshelf collection, what would be some of the common themes or some of the common trends in the stuff that you've read? You know, you can feel people, I don't know whether other people can relate to this, but you can feel the energy.
I do personally.
Yeah, well,
when I visit people's houses, I love looking at their bookshelves. But it's a lot, but it's that in this day and age of Kindles, it's a lot more difficult. But I love looking at people's bookshelves. Ian, are you a bookshelf voyeur?
In fact, over recent times, and I think I'm linking in with what you're saying, Fergal, my reading schedule has gone right up. There's more time to do it. In fact, I was in a dinner the other day at Eastland, and they said business was right up there. People are buying up big time on books, which I think is great. But I do value reading biographies about people. Like one book that I have read, and I don't have shares in this, by the way, okay, but there's a guy called Hugh Van Cullenberg who wrote the book Resilience. Now, he's in schools, he's in sporting clubs and so forth, and he's got an acronym that he really pushes. It's GEM, which stands for gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. It's things like that. So I found that quite inspirational to read, as I've already mentioned with regard to Hugh Mackay and getting an understanding of the psyche of the way Australians think and behave and predictions for the future. I find them really, really helpful. Currently, at the moment, I'm reading a biography by Mike Willesee and about his journey. Now, I know he recently passed away last year, but it's an incredible story. I'm partway through it. I find them inspirational. I find it's just great to journey with people along, you know, what they've found in life and the way they've addressed some of the issues that they've been confronted by.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on the word resilience. I mean, for me, as a clinician, resilience or a lack of resilience is one of the key features that I see in patients with substance use disorders. So, Maree, what do you think about resilience and going back to social connectedness? Can social connectedness improve resilience?
Well, you know, like you know, when we're talking about reading biographies and stuff like that, you know, there is an energy when someone is on purpose in their life, when they do something where they're, you know, they may have you know, I'm a big believer in multiple intelligences. I've done a lot of work with people and their multiple intelligences, and when we can channel our multiple intelligences, the gifts that come to us quite naturally, I think there is a birthing of inspiration that comes from people. You know, when you see people who are on purpose, when they're on mission, when they're on target, they light up. There's an energy. There is an energy. People actually just naturally are drawn to them like moths to light. And in response to resilience, I think, and I don't want to generalize here, but I'm also conscious that sometimes we have become so averse to people suffering. Like I've seen, and I work in schools, so I sometimes see where there's a fine line between allowing people to develop some backbone, if I can use the word respectfully, and in connection with that is some resilience. Sometimes, you know, life isn't just a continual party. We do have to know the dark and the light. We do have to know some despair before we can know the opposite.
So, Maree, tell me, you really do think that to appreciate joy, you have to know suffering? Isn't that a bit biblical?
Quite possibly, but I mean, if you think about you know, a lot of the dualisms that exist, you know, we can only know one. You know, how can we know what true happiness is if we don't know sadness? How can we know what the opposite to fear is until we actually can experience peace?
Well, there are those that would say that suffering is not the birthright of humanity, and that, you know, you know, suffering for me involves the descent into substance misuse, and there are those that would say that there is no need to suffer, there is no need to know substance misuse to actually appreciate life. I mean, that you know, there are those who would fundamentally disagree with you, I suppose.
Quite possibly.
What do you think, Ian?
Well, I'm thinking of you in your role, Fergal. I would imagine, and the same with Maree as well, you would experience seeing a lot of people suffering. In our own lives, I'm sure that we've all had points of difficulty where we've suffered as well. But there'd be different levels of suffering. So that doesn't mean that necessarily I have to experience fully those terrible levels of what some people suffer, because I guess I bring into play that level of empathy. Even though I can't fully experience all that they've suffered, I do try to imagine what their suffering must be like. I think that's quite a driving force behind me. Having done a little bit of study, you know, I think it's called the area of theodicy, which is like the study of suffering, which probably has a bit of a biblical connection there, but it does define, it can define our life because it sets up that comparative element. I think it's, in this day and age, I think we all need to be showing that sense of community, but with that empathy with one another. There was, as an example, like there's, you know, a number of elderly ladies that just live in my street here. It's a simple thing just to go knock on their door and ask them that question, are you okay? Can we help it or support you in some way? Because my empathy is that they've got challenges being at their age and getting in, getting out, all that type of thing. But I think that's been a bit of a message. That's a good story message that's going across our society at the moment. Every now and then with our news bulletins, we'll get some of those stories that are coming through in amongst all of the terribleness that's going on with the coronavirus. So I think that's, you know, trying to be positive in how we respond in this day and age.
So are you saying then that your personal experience of suffering has created within you an empathy which then allows you to care for your wider community? Is that am I following that train of thought?
Correct.
Okay, tell us a few of the other projects that you're doing then in terms of the way that you helped your wider community, and how do you feel it has an impact on people and their suffering?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you another example, and sorry that I've got this publicity. It's just that the vicinity provide this, so I might as well just do it, because you've got to have some visuals in this type of thing. This one is for whatever reason, I was standing in the shower one morning, and this idea of a community choir came to my head, and the long and short of it is we've been able to create this community choir that's been going since the beginning of the 4th school term last year. Which has eventuated in about 25 to 30 members. And already they've had about 4 different opportunities to perform. We've got the shopping centre, okay, the malls and the different places, which I've got access to. So it means that we can do that type of thing. And they're a terrific group of people, very eclectic, the age group is very, very wide. They've all got different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions, whatever you want to say, but they're all coming together. All of them are a part of a WhatsApp group as well, which we've set up. So there's this communication that goes on during the week, as well as our rehearsals, because they rehearse weekly on a Tuesday morning. But now that we've had the coronavirus and we've got to have the social distancing and all that type of stuff, our choir master, Lisa, she's actually been putting on the WhatsApp group short video clips of what the songs are and the lyrics, so people can continue to practice and continue on, which is very creative. But the response I see coming back from all the comments that they make is their level of appreciation, their level of connectivity, their level of enjoyment, their level of, they anticipate looking forward to coming, they anticipate looking to see what's coming up next. So that's been incredibly positive for a range of group of people that I've found. Can I give you one more example? Please do. Now, this one's come out a little bit out of you, Fergal, might I say. One of your clients, in fact, from the Carrington Health or Turning Point is being referred to us because we've started a community boat building group. And I found a number of gentlemen. It's not a men's shed as such, but I found a group of men who are extremely passionate about boat building. And so we've been able to get one of your clients being referred to us, and he's been coming regular basis and connecting with a bunch of guys, working on a boat together, sanding, painting, polishing, crafting, whatever, but at the same time rubbing shoulders with these other guys, just talking about life, whatever those conversations that come up, and just to encourage him. Now, this particular person, because of his a level of suffering and what's going on in his life with regard to substance abuse, he doesn't have a whole lot of connections now. He's got his mum and dad, but he's lost a lot of his friends because of what's unfolded in his life. Within this group now, he's found real connection. It's been purposeful. It's been really joyful. And now I myself maintain a weekly connection with him, even if it's by a phone call. So that, I'm hoping, is the start of something that we can gradually build on. And may I even so say that, just having recently spoken to your Turning Point group, they've come forth with a whole list of different social purposeful pursuits that they think would help their patients, which I'm now working on putting together a list of folk who might be able to support that. And that all ranges from things like from creative writing groups to walking in parks, to appreciate nature groups, to a whole range of different things where they possibly, as a part of their treatment with you, then can be then connected with a purposeful social group to perhaps add to their treatment.
So that's a fabulous example of what you described before as purposeful activity. So, the creation of something of meaning, and at the same time rubbing shoulders with other people, being able to shoot the breeze. I think that's a fabulous example. What do you reckon, Maree? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's I think it's absolutely pretty spot on. One of the things I wanted to say before, when we were talking about suffering, one of the reasons that I think why I give mention to it is sometimes we have to lean into the suffering, because it's in our suffering that we know something needs to change.
So the opposite to what you've said, I'm being deliberately polemical here, but the opposite to what you've said is that joy alleviates substance misuse, right? What you're saying is leaning into suffering is one of the ways of developing resilience and helping people with substance use disorders, right? What about this argument that joy, purposeful activity, helps people avoid or lift themselves out of substance misuse? And I want to describe
I would agree.
Yeah. So maybe we're just talking about different sides of the same coin, but I want to talk to you about...
I think, completely.
Yeah. Have you heard about the Rat Park experiment?
No.
Ian, have you heard about the Rat Park experiment?
Yes.
Well, you tell us about the Rat Park experiment then.
In fact, I think you might have been the one that relayed this to me. Fascinating. Now, I can't give you all the exact details of who ran it and what, but I think, and please correct me, modify me if I'm wrong, but I believe there were 2 rats that were put into an enclosure. Within that enclosure, there was basically nothing. It was just a bare room. But there were 2 water sources, one with normal water, and I believe the other water source was laced with a drug, such as heroin, something like that. Yeah. So during that time, those 2 animals being in that enclosure, they gravitated towards the water that was laced with the drug. Because it perhaps, from what I understand, just deadened the boredom, deadened the fact that they didn't have anything purposeful to do. So therefore, going forward, they set up another enclosure. Let's call the other enclosure a rat heaven. The rat heaven consisted of all different types of objects, circular wheels, little enclosures, little tunnels that the rats could, maneuver in and out and around about. The same 2 water sources existed there too, one with water and the other one which was laced with the drug. What they found, the researchers, was that the 2 rats actually didn't go towards the water source with the drug. They went to the water source with the water, because they found that because of all of the purposeful pursuits and enjoyments that they were having, they didn't need to deaden the boredom, to deaden the feelings of hurt or whatever you want to say. So that proves, I guess, strongly that people, if they have purposeful pursuits in life and endeavours and can engage with society in a purposeful and viable way, it takes away the need for going down the path for substance abuse and other things.
So, Maree, I mean, we were taught, you were originally saying that leaning into suffering as a way of escaping substance misuse, if that's what I heard you. I mean, you know, for me, the Rat Park experiment is one of the many proofs that suggest that joy, happiness, as elusive as that might be, is one of the mechanisms by which we can escape substance misuse. And I suppose happiness also it represents resilience. It's not happiness is not the rush that you get from a drug. It's that deep-seated contentment born of resilience and a right relationship with one's fellow man. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, you know, people seem to notice that happiness is going to be this kind of euphoric thing. And I have heard about that. I didn't know the title of the rat thing, but I'm certainly aware of it. And again, it reinforces the need for this. And I think, like, in a lot of this social connectedness is actually preventative. So I think there's multiple arms to this. I think that there are those people who a sense of connection, and you know, we only need to look at the things like the the rehab centres and the sense of community. You know, I'm not going to jump in on the whole 12-step thing, but I know that I've certainly seen some of those.
Why not?
Well, no, I know some people have got some incredible connections through that, and I know some people, their connections to those groups have been the only thing that's actually kept them out of using. So of course, and the common denominator in that is social connection.
It is.
So
I don't think that they work for everyone.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think they work for everyone, but for those for whom it works very well.
Correct. So I think there's the preventative aspect, and that's what I think, what Ian's talking about, and I think a lot of that RAD experiment and that sort of shows that. And I think there is, for those who are suffering, sometimes they need to lean into their suffering to use that as a catalyst to, well, what's really, if I'm going to step outside of what I'm going through, and we know this connects with motivational interviewing, we know this.
Now, you mentioned motivational interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what motivational interviewing is and how does it relate to for instance, substance use and the management of substance use disorders?
So, look, motivational interviewing, a lot of people, when they're using a substance, sometimes the people have got an ambivalence about, if I'm not using, what the heck's going to happen? And it can naturally evoke panic and trepidation and a whole lot of angst for people. So,
contemplating life without the drug.
And if you think about, the whole thing around the way that substance use affects the central nervous system of people, the moment, sometimes people find that they're being asked, challenging questions, or they can literally get into defense of the drug use. They can get into that, I'm going to defend my right to use my drug, and tell you to, go get stuff, mind your own business. And in some ways only digs the hole deeper, because then they're just in battle with themselves and their defense of continuing to use. So motivational interviewing is the complete opposite of that. It's that it's about sort of sitting with the fact that people are often, in stages of change. When we talk about the model of now, is it Prochaska and Di Clementi? Is that how I pronounce it? Fergal, you would know.
Well, I know what you mean. The cycle of change.
The cycle of change, going around from pre-contemplation to contemplation and the steps that are going around that. But, people sometimes think that they can do someone a favour by hounding at someone about all of the, the reasons why they should stop and, the health risks. And it just digs a bigger hole and people get defensive about it, and they get into rebellion and the cycle doesn't really change.
So I call that the righting reflex, the desire to correct people's behaviour by external force.
Yes. Yeah. And
so Ian, have you, go on.
No, that's basically what I was just going to say. So motivational interviewing is essentially a way of, sitting with people while they're in this space of deliberation until a point where the seesaw starts to swing from, this is not okay to, I can't keep doing what I'm doing, to, listening to the complete cost of the lifestyle and the associated impact of that.
Yeah. And so Ian, Go on.
I was just going to say, if I could just jump in to ask Maree something, because I find it fascinating what she's saying with the motivational interviewing. It's great, and I need to learn more about this. But the number of folk that I have come across, Maree, over recent times, where part of them is able to say, yes, I realise the benefit and getting out and being purposeful and connecting. And then in the same breath, they'll say, it's just so tough to get out of bed. I'm really struggling. Is this, can you unpack that a little bit for me in terms of how may I respond to situations like that?
Oh, absolutely. And, for a lot of our clients, I always sit there and think about what is the substance offering a person? So for me personally, and this is just something that, I've heard from other clinicians and I've taken it on board, and I don't hold it as gospel, but, if someone says to me that they're drinking, or someone says to me that they're using an amphetamine type based drug, the first thing what I'm trying to work out is what is that drug offering that person? Now, for some people, they've got such horrible social anxiety, or they're so struggling, and I don't know, Fergal, you might be able to relate to this, and Ian, you may see this as well. For a lot of the clients that have got a substance abuse, a relationship to substances, there's a questioning of where do they fit in society, because some people who are trying to make lifestyle changes they know that part of that is going to be separating from their clan, from their tribe. And that brings up grief. That brings up, again, if I'm not in connection with somebody, sometimes some connection with somebody is better than no connection at all, even if it's detrimental to the person's well-being. So, sometimes I might think, well, okay, if they're needing to use a substance because they're so socially struggling, then for me, I might be sitting there thinking, well, the drug is basically trying to buffer all of their insecurities, all of their uncertainties, all of their, I'm not going to be able to cope with the social skills necessary. But they're so apprehensive about being accepted or being judged or feeling like they're less than, that they don't know then how to do the social dance, because some of that's been lost. For clients who have started using drugs at 15, they've lost. They struggle. They feel inadequate, and all of their insecurities really start screaming up. Then you put them in a social context, and then they're like absolutely nervous. Yes. So for me, I tend to think about, if they're working just one-on-one, they're still starting to get that. They're tolerating social distress in some ways just by merely even being in your presence, Ian. So, correct. And then yes. Even if I sit there and think, if they're walking their dog and, have they been able to engage in a conversation as someone goes to put some mail in the letterbox, I always build on that, because it's that kind of, it's greater desensitization for a start. And sometimes it's just around, creating a sense of calm and signaling a sense of safety that, a lot of people out there, I think the stats are, is that 1 in 3 people have got some sort of issue in relation to anxiety. So I do a lot of psychoeducation, so that I might say to someone, well, you might be doing a bit of this beautiful group work that, the offerings that you're doing, Ian, and just explain that there's going to be so many other people, for whatever reason, maybe battling with their own internal feelings of being an imposter, not feeling okay, feeling different, feeling inadequate. Sometimes even it's going to sound strange, but even just the unconditional, when someone looks at their pet dog or they look at the love of their cat, for people who've got really social discomfort, just even to be able to embody that sense of somebody can look at them in an adoring way, soothes our amygdala, it calms down our anxiety response.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. I'm going to jump in there. Unconditional love.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing, Ian, going back to what you said, I have so many patients, and you put all the work around them. You optimize their physical health, you optimize their treatment, and they still can't get out of bed. They still can't take those first steps. It's like a car when you put your foot down on the accelerator and there's no acceleration. And I share that almost that despair, Ian. It's very disheartening sometimes. But Maree, what you're saying is just make the steps smaller. Is that what you're saying? And learn and get them to love themselves.
Look, I tend to drive a lot of. Look, I use a range of techniques when I work with clients about stuff like this. So I use emotional freedom technique, which is a tapping technique, and we know that it drops the cortisol. We know it. It takes away a lot of the anxiety and the trepidation. I also use things like, like circle, and people think it's strange, but even just circling your palm, again, it interrupts the centers of the brain connected with anxiety and anger. So if I can equip my clients with some self-soothing tools, skills of being mindful, having a rock in their hand that they can even just, again, get themselves out of their thoughts of people are going to think I'm stupid, people are going to think that I'm dumb, I'm not going to know what to say, people will notice my hands shaking. Sometimes I'll do education around it and use a lot of the acceptance and commitment therapy principles by saying, what if you can just notice that thought is just simply a thought? What if you can just notice that, and I give the example, if you were walking down the road and you see cars going up and down, do you jump into their cars as a passenger and just be subjected to whatever chattering is going on with the driver who's driving the car? And clients will go, well, absolutely not. And I'll say, so in some ways, but you're letting your own thoughts hijack it. You're actually letting your own thoughts of, I'm not going to be good enough, I've got no energy, I can't get out of the bed, I'm too tired. I actually just really, and the other example I use is the example of being on a city loop, going around and around the cycle, the darkness and the despair of the city loop. And I'll say something like, what's going to happen if we can just incrementally move the train track? And you think about Melbourne's Metropolitan Railway, and instead of it just going around like this, you can start to deviate and everything just builds on the other. It might be about taking one person that they feel confident with, or even a peer support worker that they may have developed a connection with, any way of just very gently infiltrating. And eventually, it's basically just that allowing their brain to say, I'm actually safe. I've sat in this chair, or I've sat with this cup in my hand. I've had some eye contact with these other people in the group. And even sometimes with just signals of, okay, what would I be needing to look in this person to tell me that they're getting to their threshold, they're starting to get up there and might want to bolt or might want to flee. Does that help?
Yeah, Maree, I really appreciate your thoughts, because I'm just reflecting, say, for instance, on this boat building program that we've got in this particular client that we've got engaged, and as part of the 4 hours that we had all together, it involved morning tea and lunch, which was fantastic, and we all just sat around and chatted and about any issue that just came up. But I was also cognizant of the fact that there was 3 of us and just one of him, and around those sensitivities, how is he coping, what is he thinking, what's going on in his mind, with what you, in line with what you were saying. And a part of me has been thinking, well, if Fergal refers patients to me for purposeful pursuits and a connection there, I do know that a lot of community centres, and they do wonderful, provide wonderful provision for activities and so forth, but often they're large groups and they're pretty focused on what they're particularly doing. But I find this one-on-one, where it's in a very careful, caring environment, where they can be sensitive to the needs that you were expressing before, which I found really helpful, that the opportunity is great to develop that sense of trust, and for him to take the risk of wanting to be there to connect, that'll be more ongoing, as against, being too overwhelming and then him not turning up again. Would you agree with that approach?
Oh, absolutely. And, that's why, again, sometimes when we take things back to people's multiple intelligences, like some people who are so amazing with their hands, they're the people that, eye contact could be incredibly intimidating for those people. So anything that can still allow them to have a sense of, even if it's dual play, you think about even when we think about stages of growing up and, that parallel play that kids used to have as part of their own socialisation. Sometimes even just somebody being able to do a part of a bigger project, but know that they've been a contributor to just that one small part. Like if it is working on a boat, And I think, one of the beautiful things I think you just said there, Ian, is that sensitivity that you just spoke about is being curious. What's going on in the eyes of the other? What's happening for that person? I know a lot of clients when they're in, when they're either, people think that just because they've come out or they've done a 7-day detox or they've done a program or whatever it is, that the whole way that the brain has to reconnect and tolerate distress and tolerate stimulation is a really important thing to consider. Their tolerance for flipping into hypoarousal or hyperarousal or hypoarousal is, something we've really got to keep in the back of our minds. So I guess the fact that you're even curious by asking, what can I be doing to send a signal of safety to somebody? It could be something like, hey, listen, if you start to feel a bit like things are a bit too much, is there can you give me just a little gesture that tells me, you might just need to, again, come back to send that signal of safety. But you'd be surprised how the more people keep doing things, they're literally getting that sense of mastery.
Yes.
And habituating to the they're actually increasing their level of their distress tolerance, and their window of tolerance actually increases. And that's the beauty of the work you're doing.
And I find it fascinating too, and I think it's a fairly generally known thing, that when men are doing something, working away, that is males, that's when they start to talk. And that's and that's when they open up, and then almost you can't stop them. Then it's just great, and so that's where you get the opportunities to just really get a good idea, get a good understanding of how they're really feeling. And so that's, if we can get inside their head and where their feelings are at, then hopefully that point of connection will continue to grow and grow.
Absolutely.
So, Ian, what do you think about role modeling in this regard? And bear in mind, we have to be mindful of the time. So I just want, Ian, your comment, your thoughts on role modeling, and then Maree's, and then we're going to have to summarize what we've talked about so far.
Sure. I'll try and be really brief then, Fergal. And I think maybe I've already unpacked this a little bit, but the idea of having, as an example with the boat building program, having 2 or 3 other guys around someone who's going through these challenges in their life as role models, as mentoring, as people that they can develop. I'm going to use this expression again, trustworthy relationships. We've lost trust in a lot of stuff. And if people can get that back into their lives, I believe it will be a very powerful force in supporting them on their journey.
Yeah. And Maree, what do you think about that?
In response to role modeling? I think it's a cornerstone when we look at even the principles that govern things like DBT. When we take things back to a value base, and we can actually then say to somebody, the role models, what would be the qualities in somebody that you would aspire to be? The more that you can agitate that or stir that up in someone, and know that in some ways role models are a lighthouse for people. I think role models are like the north-facing star, and that people, in moments of temptation or in moments of potentially making different choices or choices that may not serve somebody in the best way that they can, if they can recalibrate, or if they can go back to a point of asking themselves, what would so-and-so do in this situation? Who do they most admire? I think that offers an anchoring point for people to make a different choice. So role models are massive out there for people.
What does a lack of role model cause? I mean, does it cause harm in the people that you look after?
Oh, if they can't, sometimes when we're, even especially when I would do family therapy type work, it's about highlighting who has been a keeper or a holder of something different. Who was a person who could instill a sense of safety? Who was someone who had that nurturing, presencing component? I think there's when you're really looking upstream, and this is where even if people have grown up in some of the most turbulent situations, I might even have to go as far as saying, if it wasn't somebody in your own family, who was a mentor, who was somebody else's parent that you looked to and thought, they've got it down pat, they're nailed it, they know, who, if it's not trusted doctor, if it wasn't a doctor, was it an integration aid worker, was it a teacher, Who was it that offered a sense of this is what a different form of normal looks like? And usually you can build on it from there, because if they don't have that sense of, and I've even had to see people use even fictitious people, shows off TV. The Brady Bunch is a classic example. People have had to default to, the mother on that show as that if I was to lean into what that person would look like, that's what they'd offer. It would be those qualities. It would be that compassion. It'd be that nurturing. It'd be that unconditional support, unconditional love. So, yeah, you're right. Without that, there's no anchor.
Yeah.
And
so, Maree, and Ian, I'm going to ask you this question as well, so just prepare your answer. But Maree, we've had a wide-ranging discourse. What's the most important point that you'd like people to remember from our chat? Maybe 1 or 2 points. How would you summarize what your feelings and views are on our discussion?
Look, I think there is a lot more stuff that joins us in. There's more similarity between a lot of people than there is dissimilarity. I think people sometimes use the perception that they are so different. However, you'd know this, and Ian, you probably know this, Fergal. How many times do people sit in your chair and say that they feel different, they don't feel like they belong, they feel like they're a fraud, they feel like they're, all of these, as I said, we refer to as imposter syndromes. How many of these people, what they don't realise, that if you just had other people sitting in the chair and then pushed play, their stories are so similar. People seem to think that they are so not the same, when in fact I think a lot of people, I think we've got more similarity than we've got dissimilarity. I think personally, and people.
So what you're alluding to is a sense of belonging.
I think people's perception that they don't belong, because we've got these superficial, and I don't think, look, this is another topic for another conversation, but I do believe that Facebook and all these other social medias, when they're used in the right way, can be amazing. I think what it's also done is create so much social comparison that people don't think they're adequate, that they think that they're somehow they're not able to meet the grade, when in fact there is more people meeting the grade because of the similarity of experiences than differences.
And Ian, what about you? How would you summarise your views on what we've discussed so far?
A great question, Fergal. In some ways, I refer a bit to Brené Brown and her big push on the power of vulnerability. That has a really big impact on the work that I do, because I find myself so often in situations where I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? But I find that I'm just making myself available and being there to accompany people during, challenging times. I think the expression of reaching out, particularly during this current time with the coronavirus, I think that for those of us who are feeling well equipped and feel well resourced with things, to have that desire to reach out to people, just to ask them that simple question: are you okay? How are you traveling between 1 and 10? And I think that despite all the challenges we're facing during this time, there are many other things that are opening with people communicating. I mean, even as an example, I know the time's short, but my mother's 91, and she just lives locally at a retirement village. When I go to visit her now, we sit out in the backyard, with a couple of meters apart. But what I'm finding, I've just taught Mum recently how to FaceTime. And she feels like that when we do a FaceTime now, it's the first time she's learned how to do it. It was only yesterday. She feels like that we're having actually a visit with each other. So it's just finding creative ways of continuing to connect with people to just bring about a greater sense of community during challenging times.
Our need to get back to community, our need to get back. In fact, I've done a vlog this morning about what I think is really happening now is we've now got this notion of time and we don't know what to do with it. For the first time, we're not, scheduling dinner dates. We're not scheduling catch-ups with people, in the way that we would normally. We don't have parents driving their kids here, there and every activity scheduling like crazy. And I think what's really happening now is we've got this notion of time, and then what the heck do we do with that? And I think it's actually panicking people, because it's like, we've taken this chunk of stuff out. We've often yearned so desperately to have a different relationship with time, and now it's like, what the heck are we doing with it? And But yeah, that the stuff that you're doing, like honestly, if there was more availability of what you're doing to complement people who might not be able to necessarily go into an actual rehab, you know, you think about programs that are 6 months, 12 months long, you know, I think they've got their merit, but at some point people need to come back into the communities in which they've lived.
It's just, unfortunately, we've got this coronavirus that's kind of just put a bit of a hold to things. But in the background, I'm still being able to do still lots of work because, and you were leaning towards this a little bit before, Maree, these times, I mean, I just heard a report this morning about the level of family violence that's escalated because of people being crammed in their homes. But holding that thought just there, on the other side of the coin, the amount of innovation that's going on. I mean, now I'm finding my mornings being taken up with Zoom meetings, you know, and I'm connecting with all these different people at different levels. So, you know, one door shuts, another door opens, and it's just about trying to exploit the good opportunities to the best of their ability, despite all the difficulties that we're having at the moment. Even like this today, it's been cathartic in my mind to have this conversation. You know, where it goes, what happens, I don't, I guess that's going to be up to Fergal and Tony, but it's been great. I mean, it's another connection I've made with you, Maree, and I would like to think that I can catch up with you again, because I'd still want to get inside your head and pick your brains more, because I think you could be really helpful to the way I conduct my affairs and what I do each day. So it's been great.
Yeah, I've actually been just doing some training on, facilitating women's circles, and there's now what I'm really hearing from that is that there is a push for males circles as well, and they can be done via Zoom as well. So even just some of the activities, I mean, I don't know what kind of wording you want to use it. I mean, it's sad that we've had to, for guys to even get together, they have to use metaphors of like cars getting serviced and all this other sort of health promotion activities. But yeah, I'm really, there's so many different activities that I've got that, even, I'm an expressive therapist and trained in art therapy, but, even bringing guys together, even if it's over the internet where people can just do some of these different, practices is fantastic. But yeah, I'm absolutely, and if there's anything that I can do or even any skills that I can show you that you can then take out to these people, because as I said, people can really, how many times do people, they start feeling inadequate, they start thinking something's wrong, then they get onto Google, then all of a sudden they've self-diagnosed themselves with all of this damn pathology, whereas they could be out there socialising and their whole neural pathways go down a completely different stream, which is what we want.
Exactly.
We want health. We don't want pathology.
That's it for today's show. A big thanks to Maree and Ian. If you are watching this on YouTube, click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of new episodes. And if you want to leave any comments, leave them below or email us. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.